Hollywood preached family values. Behind the curtain, it practiced control. For some of its most celebrated stars, the real damage was done at home. They built empires on charm and applause, then used their children as currency. This isn't legend, it's what happened when fame entered the family. To the world, Joan Crawford was the ultimate self-made woman, a creature of iron will and impeccable glamour. She was the face of resilience during the Depression, a woman who clawed her way from poverty to the heights of MGM. Behind closed doors, however, that iron will become a weapon of domestic terror.
She went to my closet and I had a favorite yellow dress, and she took a pair of scissors and she cut it to shreds and then told me I had to wear it for a week, and if anybody asked me why I was in this condition, I was to tell them I didn't like pretty things.
Her daughter, Christina, would later recount a childhood governed by a pathological obsession with order and cleanliness. It wasn't merely the infamous wire hangers. It was the psychological erasure of a child's autonomy. Joan demanded a performance of love, a choreographed display of gratitude that left no room for the messiness of a real, human connection. Years later, the image of the weeping star clutching her children for the cameras would be revealed as a hollow tableau, a mask for a woman who saw her children not as people, but as props in the long-running production of her own life. The contrast was perhaps even more jarring in the case of Bing Crosby. To the world, he was the easygoing voice of Christmas, the pipe-smoking father figure who embodied the relaxed confidence of post-war America. Behind closed doors, the man who sang of peace and goodwill governed his household with a belt and a cold, exacting discipline. His son, Gary, would later describe a home where the slightest infraction, a forgotten chore or a lackluster grade, was met with corporal punishment that bordered on the ritualistic. There was no room for the Dare Bingle persona at the dinner table. Years later, after two of his sons had taken their own lives, the world was forced to reconcile the crooner's velvet voice with the silence he imposed upon his own family. Bette Davis commanded the screen with eyes that seemed to see through walls, a woman of fierce intellect and terrifying volatility. To the world, she was the brave actress who took on the studio system. Behind closed doors, that same volatility turned inward.
And I don't think it's just my relationship with my mother that is causing all the interest. I think it affects a lot of relationships between a lot of mothers and daughters, and I've been told this a lot on the tour.
Her daughter, B.D. Hyman, described a mother who viewed her child as a rival for center stage. Davis would cast her daughter in the role of a confidant one moment and a villain the next, weaponizing her own insecurities to keep the girl in a state of perpetual emotional whiplash. Years later, Davis would respond to her daughter's accusations not with a mother's concern, but with the grand, wounded performance of a betrayed queen, cutting her child out of her life with the same surgical precision she used on her enemies. The golden shadow of Marlene Dietrich was equally long and chilling. To the world, she was the ultimate aristocrat of the screen, a woman of mystery and cool detachment. Behind closed doors, she was a mother who demanded total devotion while offering only a suffocating, possessive brand of affection.
My mother was royalty.
Her daughter, Maria Riva, lived in the orbit of a woman who saw herself as a god, one who required her child to serve as an audience, a nurse, and a mirror. There was no room for Maria to exist outside of Marlene's needs. Years later, the glamour of the Blue Angel would be seen for what it was, a cold, consuming fire that left little but ash for the next generation. In the case of Judy Garland, the cruelty was inherited before it was ever practiced. To the world, she was the girl from Oz, the voice of a generation's longing. Behind closed doors, she was the product of Ethel Gum, a stage mother who saw her daughter as a commodity to be exploited at any cost.
My mother was truly a stage mother.
Ethel was the one who first introduced the young Judy to the pep pills and sleeping drafts that would eventually destroy her, all to keep the girl working and the money flowing. Years later, Judy would describe her mother as the real witch of the West, a woman who traded her daughter's childhood for a chance at a reflected spotlight. This cycle of exploitation found a different form in the life of Natalie Wood. To the world, she was the dark-eyed beauty of the 50s and 60s. Behind closed doors, she was under the thumb of Maria Gurden, a woman who used fear as a primary tool of parenting. Maria famously told her daughter that if she ever touched a butterfly, its wings would crumble, and she instilled in Natalie a paralyzing fear of water, a fear that would prove hauntingly prophetic. Maria was the architect of Natalie's career, but she was also the jailer of her spirit, molding her into a star while denying her the stability of a mother's. Protection. The theft of a child's future was a common theme in the halls of old Hollywood. Mickey Rooney and Jackie Coogan were the kings of the box office as children, earning fortunes that should have lasted lifetimes. To the world, they were the lucky ones. Behind closed doors, their parents, Nell Rooney and Arthur Coogan, were systematically draining their bank accounts. While the boys worked 18-hour days under hot lights, their parents lived in luxury on the proceeds. Years later, Coogan would find himself penniless, leading to the creation of the Coogan Law, which would stand as a legal monument to the betrayal of a father who saw his son as an ATM. Elizabeth Taylor's mother, Sarah Taylor, took a more psychological approach to the same end. To the world, Elizabeth was the most beautiful girl in the world. Behind closed doors, Sarah was the director of every movement, every look, every word. She coached Elizabeth to be an adult before she was even a teenager, pushing her into the arms of studios and older men to secure the fame Sarah had never achieved for herself. Years later, Elizabeth would spend a lifetime searching for the love that her mother had replaced with a professional contract. Even the icons of rugged masculinity, the men who defined the American spirit for a generation, were not immune to this domestic darkness. To the world, John Wayne was the ultimate symbol of strength and moral certainty. Behind closed doors, he was a distant and demanding patriarch who expected his household to run with the precision of a cavalry charge. He cast a shadow so large it left little sun for his children to grow. Years later, his children would speak of a man who loved them through a veil of expectation, demanding a brand of manhood that left no room for the complexities of a real human heart. This same emotional chasm existed in the home of Henry Fonda. To the world, he was the honest everyman, the voice of integrity in a cynical world. Behind closed doors, he was a man of profound and terrifying silences. He didn't use a belt. He used a cold, impenetrable detachment that acted as a different kind of lash.
At this late stage of my life, I'm happy to be able to say, Dad, I love you dearly. I know you did your best.
To the public, he was the hero of 12 Angry Men. To his children, he was a jury that had already reached a verdict of indifference. Sometimes the cruelty was not in the distance, but in the deliberate fracturing of a family's foundation. To the world, Joan Fontaine and Olivia de Havilland were the queens of Hollywood grace. Behind closed doors, their mother, Lillian Fontaine, was the architect of a sibling rivalry so bitter it would last nearly a century. She played her daughters against one another like pieces on a chessboard, favoring one then the other to ensure that their primary loyalty remained tied to her approval. Years later, The two sisters would stop speaking entirely, a final tragic monument to a mother who believed that love was a finite resource to be rationed and weaponized. And then there was Ginger Rogers, whose mother, Layla, was so enmeshed in her daughter's life that it was often difficult to tell where one ended and the other began. To the world, she was the light-footed queen of the RKO musical. Behind closed doors, her mother, Layla, was the unseen hand moving the puppet strings. Layla was her manager, her agent, and her moral guardian, dictating everything from the scripts she read to the men she married. Years later, it became clear that Ginger's effortless grace on screen was the result of a life lived in a gilded cage, where the price of stardom was the surrender of her own identity to a mother who refused to ever let the curtain fall. Perhaps the most haunting legacy of all was that of Cary Grant. To the world, he was the man every man wanted to be and every woman wanted to have, the epitome of class. Behind closed doors, he was a man haunted by a betrayal of the highest order. His father, Elias Leach, had told a 10-year-old Cary that his mother was dead, when in reality, Elias had simply institutionalized her to clear the path for a new life. For decades, Cary searched for the woman he thought was a ghost, a victim of a father's cold convenience. Years later, even when he found her, the damage was done. The man who seemed to have everything spent his life running from the shadow of a father who had traded the truth for a clean slate. As we look back at these faces, flickering in the darkness of our memories, we are forced to ask what we truly bought with our theater tickets. We purchased a piece of their souls, and in turn, they often took the souls of their children to pay the debt.